This is my randomology, and today we're going to find out why John Carpenter has that certain thing. If you've been watching this channel or follow me on Facebook for any length of time, you'll know that The Thing is one of my absolute favorite horror movies. In fact, I will go so far as to say it's probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, horror movie of all time, and I will die on this hill. It's still considered one of the gold standards in the genre, and for good reason. Why? Well, we're going to take a look at the story, the way the movie's put together, certain key scenes, and figure out what makes this movie so terrifying, so entertaining, and maybe along the way we'll figure out who was the Thing and when were they the Thing. The movie begins with long shots of the Antarctic wilderness as a helicopter chases a good boy through the snow, and soon the chase finds Outpost 31, which for some reason is labeled as National Science Institute Station 4 on the outside. I don't know, different scripts. When the helicopter finally does land and the shooter runs out to keep shooting at the dog, the crew inside the American station comes out to try to see what all the shooting is about. And if you know Norwegian, you'll understand that Lars, whose name is revealed in the prequel movie, is actually giving away the first major plot point of the movie, but nobody understands him. That dog ain't a dog, it's a thing. And as weird grammatically as that is, it makes sense. Now the Americans don't know this, so they end up killing Lars and bring the dog in. And that's our setup. That's the plot of the movie right there. That's how it kicks off. No B-plot, no subplot, nothing. Everything has to do with this first encounter and how the men in the American station react to it. There's a little bit of interpersonal friction with a couple of the characters, but it's minor and it's really not central to the plot, in so much as it maybe helps move along the paranoia later and who trusts who, but it's never really explored. Like, we don't really find out why some of these guys don't like each other. Could just be plain cabin fever. We don't know. Does it matter? Nope. The entire movie is set up as basically all killer, no filler. Following this very strange incident, MacReady, the camp's pilot, goes out with the doctor to try to investigate what happened at the Norwegian base. And what follows is a couple of minutes of MacReady and the doctor going through the base and seeing damage, bodies, explosion marks, burned corpses, and trying to figure out what happened here. And for us, the audience, we're getting a glimpse into what will eventually happen to the American station, even if we don't know it yet. This allows the audience to participate in that. We're given a mystery, we're given some clues, and as the movie unfolds, these clues give us those, aha, I get it, I know what happened in the other place. And this is what ends up making movies like this, and mysteries actually in general, so satisfying, when the audience has that feeling of, I get it, I understand it. And John Carpenter set this up from the very beginning. MacReady and Cooper bring in the body of something that apparently, according to the doctor, has human organs, which makes no sense because this thing looks like a jigsaw puzzle put together by a couple of Cenobites. This begins Blair's suspicions into what exactly is going on and how this is actually going to affect them. Oh yeah, and that dog that they brought in, yeah, it's kind of wandering around the base, you know, going here and there, everywhere, and it's about an hour, hour and a half before Clark, the dog guy, dog handler? I actually don't know what the term is. He actually ends up putting the dog in the kennel with the base's other dogs. But during this time, the dog is acting very, very suspicious. It's probably one of the best animal performances I've ever seen on screen. Now, most people who watch this movie and don't really know what it's about or don't know anything about it end up siding with the dog, and let's face it, most of us did that too, even if we knew, you know, look at this dog, look at it, look at that beautiful creature. We would all bring that dog into the base, okay? We wouldn't question it. Which makes the subsequent scene where the dog goes into the kennel with the other dogs, splits open like a blood flower, and then proceeds to try to devour the other dogs, so horrifying. In a deeply disturbing scene, we get to see these dogs attacked and in some cases half melted as the Thing dog proceeds to try to assimilate them. Now, we don't know that's what it's doing at this point. The rest of the crew realizes very quickly something is very wrong, and Childs gets a flamethrower and proceeds to make hot dogs. Blair cuts open the charred remains of the Thing dog and realizes that it was trying to absorb and assimilate and eventually copy the other dogs. And remember all the stuff they found in the Norwegian base? This is the first time that they are seeing now something that they found over there on their base. Now they're starting to see, oh, this is what started to happen in that base, and now it's happening here. And the sense of foreboding, because that base was basically destroyed, starts kicking into high gear very quickly.
That escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Realizing that things are not only way more complex, but also way more dangerous than they thought, the crew tries to implement some kind of security measure and try to investigate, but unfortunately, the corpse they brought back starts assimilating Bennings. However, they catch the thing before it can fully assimilate him and end up barbecuing him. Now, however, they have another problem, because now they don't know who is the thing. Has this thing assimilated anybody else while they weren't looking? After all, the dog was walking around the base for a good while, and we saw it go into somebody's room when nobody else was looking. Blair, realizing the apocalyptic ramifications of what they're witnessing, proceeds to destroy the helicopter, kill the dogs, thankfully off screen, the ones that survived the initial encounter, and destroy their radio equipment. And in an unintentionally hilarious scene, it takes several guys to put down a guy played by Wilford Brimley, because I gotta say that he must have been just pumped full of about 5 gallons of adrenaline at that point. The team locks him up in one of the sheds outside the base for later. That's a tomorrow problem. We have other issues in the base right now. Paranoia starts going through the roof because the rest of the team realizes they can't trust each other. They don't know where everybody was at every point over the last day. Things get worse when they find Fuchs's body outside, and they realize that he must have burned himself to keep the thing from assimilating him, so there's at least one other person who is a thing. They break off into groups to try to figure out what's going on, but when MacReady goes to check on his shack, apparently he stays outside of the main compound, he's left outside by Knowles because Knowles found a pair of pants that are torn. Not only that, these actually have MacReady's name on it. Earlier in the movie, he had found another pair of pants without a tag also torn. This is a hint that whenever the thing takes over somebody, apparently it rips through their clothing. So Knowles goes back into the main compound and leaves MacReady out there because, as far as Knowles knows, MacReady is the thing. Now, we as the audience are probably thinking, well, hold on a second, MacReady is the main character so far. He can't be the thing, right? Right? Well, MacReady actually does return, pissed off, and holds everybody hostage with a stick of dynamite. In the scuffle, however, Norris hits his head and apparently suffers a heart attack. And what follows is some of the most tense and intense special effects and horror sequences I've ever seen in my life. Cooper tries to save Norris's life because the man is apparently having a heart attack, and in the middle of defibrillating him, the thing opens up its chest and bites Cooper's arms off. This is a fantastic effect because apparently they used a double amputee with a mask of Cooper for the long shot where Cooper's raising his arms. Norris's head then proceeds to detach from his body and try to crawl away like a spider, but thankfully the team sees it and MacReady roasts it.
Boom. Roasted.
Now that scene is amazing for a number of reasons. The special effects, the tension, not to mention the jump scare of the stomach opening and then, killing Cooper. But it also contains what I think is quite possibly one of the funniest moments in horror. It's not just Palmer looking back and delivering the immortal line,
"You gotta be fucking kidding."
It's what that scene means on the rewatch. Because a few minutes from this scene, when we get the infamous blood test scene, we're gonna find out that Palmer is a thing. In the sequence where Norris, splits open and his head tries to crawl away, Palmer is already infected. He is a thing. But look at how the scene actually unfolds. Palmer is actually the first one to turn around when he hears the scuttling of the head. Palmer is a thing. It's in the thing's best interest to let this thing escape, but instead he turns around, looks at it, and delivers the line. Now, there's a lot of theories as to what the thing as copying people actually does, whether they know they're things, whether they're sleeper agents who wake up whenever they need to, or if they're conscious all the time that they are a thing and just have the memories of the people they assimilated. So consider that Palmer in this scene is not acting as Palmer would. This is the thing reacting to a part of itself doing something very stupid and trying to scuttle away in plain sight. This is not the thing pretending to be Palmer reacting to the thing. This is the thing reacting to itself. Palmer should not have turned around, but he did and drew attention to this thing because he's apparently so shocked that a piece of him is doing something this stupid. The thing is the one that says, you've gotta be fucking kidding.
It's funny because it's true.
Now the sequence, even though it is funny on a rewatch, gives MacReady an idea. He realizes that the thing doesn't work in large units. It can break itself apart. It can actually work as discrete units. So every part of the thing can function as a thing. He gets the survivors, and what proceeds is a very, very tense scene, probably one of the most tense in movie history. He draws a little bit of blood from all the survivors and proceeds to poke a petri dish with each person's blood with a hot needle. Now, he doesn't know if there's going to be a reaction, but he surmises that the blood, as an individual, will try to escape. The first couple of samples actually come back as human, which is a bit of a bummer because MacReady has already shot Clark because Clark tried to defend himself against MacReady. Those first few human results actually lead to one of the best jump scares in the movie when MacReady pokes one of the petri dishes and the blood jumps out at him. Now, what makes the effect work so well in this case is not just the fact that the blood jumps up, it's the setup to it. Because if you'll notice, whenever there's a shot of MacReady with a petri dish poking it with the hot needle, it's actually not MacReady's hand. It's actually the fake hand that they use for the subsequent jump scare because there's a thing built in there so the blood, like a little puppet, can jump out. In the scenes where the blood registers as human and nothing happens, you're seeing a fake hand, but nothing happens, so part of your brain ends up seeing, oh, this is MacReady's hand. Why wouldn't it be? Because it's not Kurt Russell's real hand in the first couple of tests, you don't register a change when they switch to the fake hand because it looks exactly the same as the other ones. In essence, the magic trick is right there in front of you, but you don't know it's a magic trick yet. And when the jack in the box pops out of the box, it catches you completely off guard. It's a brilliant way, honestly, to keep the audience from noticing that there's going to be a special effect. Just put the special effect front and center when it's not needed, and the audience registers it as it's real. And when that blood pops off, it turns out that it's actually Palmer who is the thing. Now, Palmer proceeds to kill Windows, and then MacReady ends up frying and blowing both of them up. At this point, we get something of a reprieve. We now know who is definitely human, but there's one more person they haven't tested. Blair. When they go check him out in the shack, it turns out that Blair has actually escaped and is building a spaceship. He is a thing. Now, realizing that none of them are going to get out of there, MacReady basically talks the other survivors into a suicide mission. They have to keep this thing from escaping. They have to burn it. They have to blow it up. None of them are going to get out of there, but they have to make sure that this thing is dead. They proceed to start blowing up the base, making it look like the Norwegian base that they explored at the beginning. We've now come full circle. However, during all of this, Childs ends up separating from the group and goes missing for an extended period of time. Blair kills Knowles off screen and Gary on screen. MacReady makes his final stand against the Blair thing monster at the end, blows it up, big fireball, and the base is destroyed, and MacReady is the lone survivor. Or so he thinks. That's right, Childs is actually alive. Or is he? This final scene is iconic because both men view each other with suspicion. We already established early in the movie that they don't really like each other, but now they have no real way of knowing if the other one is a thing. We can be fairly sure that MacReady is not a thing because he just blew the thing up. But is Childs a thing? With no way of communicating with anybody else, and with the fires quickly dying out, both men realize they are going to freeze to death. If one of them is the thing, they have failed, and humanity is likely doomed when a rescue team comes back and brings this thing back to civilization. But if they're both human, they're just about to freeze themselves to death in a very short amount of time. Either way, fucking grim. So then the big mystery here is, who was a thing and when were they a thing? Now, there's a couple of things that we know. Yeah, I said what I said. Now we start with 12 human characters on the base, and we know from the very first scene that the dog is a thing. Now the question becomes, when does the dog infect who? Whom? We have a scene of the dog walking down the corridor and going into somebody's room. Now, it's generally accepted that the shadow belongs to Norris. The outline seems to match, the hair's the same, and he's got a collar that kind of looks like the one that he's wearing later. Palmer is probably the one that belongs to those long johns that Knowles finds early in the movie. Again, these are both before they realize that there's actually an alien among them. We see Bennings get partially assimilated, but he doesn't last very long and doesn't get to infect anybody else. Now, Blair is the tricky one here, because Blair was actually working to keep the thing from escaping. He was the one that was questioning Clark and making all these accusations early on, so he was actually afraid. He was worried about this thing. So he wasn't a thing early in the movie. But then when was he actually infected? Was it after he got put in the shack? And if so, when? It had to be Norris or Palmer that got him, but when did they get a chance to do that? I actually have a theory here that Blair and again, this is a theory, and I have no evidence really to support it too much, but just a little bit of the movie itself. I think Blair was actually infected at some point after his talk with Clark. Because think about Blair's actions after that conversation. He goes to see the simulation, he realizes what's going to happen. If he got infected after that point, I think it's entirely possible that him destroying the helicopter and the radio equipment and everything else was a way to isolate the group so that he and the others could infect them more efficiently. See, now there's no way for them to get word out. There's no way for them to escape in a helicopter. There's nothing for them to do but stay there. While it's entirely possible that his actions in destroying all the equipment were the actions of a desperate man trying to protect humanity, I think it's also possible that he was doing that in order to isolate the team. And even if he didn't get to infect everybody, and what happened in the Norwegian base happened in the American base as well, he already knows that he can freeze and he'll be eventually, taken out by the next rescue team. Now, Childs is the other unknown. Fans have been wondering for decades whether Childs is a thing at the end. Now, Keith David has been very vocal that as far as he's concerned, he's human, but that's secondhand. I mean, that is he actually human? Well, we actually do have a definitive answer as to whether he's a human or a thing based on the prequel film. Now, I know a lot of fans don't like the prequel movie, the one with Mary Elizabeth Winstead, but I didn't think it was terrible. I didn't think it was as good as the original one, but that movie is made, it is canon, and it does answer the question of whether Childs is human, because in that movie, it establishes something else the Thing does when it assimilates somebody. Apparently, the Thing can't process things like fillings or circle implants or artificial materials in the beings that it assimilates. So whenever it assimilated somebody there and it didn't have time to clean up, people found things like fillings in, because it just kind of spat them out. Things like piercings also fall under this category. So one of the big twists at the end of that prequel film is one of our final characters realizing somebody else is a thing because they're not wearing their earring. Childs has his earring and still has his piercing at the end of the movie. That means that he really is human, and this gives us the closest thing to a happy ending this movie is going to have. Both of these survivors are humans. The Thing is dead. They're going to die, but they basically save the world. And that's The Thing, a complex and also oddly simple movie that does so many things very, very well. It keeps tension. It keeps its eye on the plot. It has special effects that would have been incredible for a team of experienced special effects people back in the day, and yet the guy in charge of all of this, I think, was 19 years old when he worked on this. The movie never explains everything. Where is the Thing from? What is it trying to do? Is the ship that crashed actually the Thing's ship, or is the Thing something that actually escaped the ship when it crashed? We never find all this stuff out. And honestly, the movie's a lot better for it because it keeps people talking about it and guessing and coming up with theories all these years later. So that's The Thing. That's why I think The Thing has held up for so long and why it became such a standard in horror and in cinema as well. I mean, the movie did not do great when it came out, but in the years since then, it's easily risen to the top of the genre. And speaking of movies that deserve a lot more love, next week, we're going to talk about The Blob. Yeah, the 1988 version with Shawnee Smith. That movie is also incredible in its own way, and it honestly deserves a lot more love than it gets. So thank you very much for watching. If you like what you saw, go ahead and head over to Patreon, subscribe to this channel, or become a member and get videos like this early, as well as longer versions that nobody else gets, and videos that just plain the rest of YouTube is not going to get to see. So thank you very much. I'll see you later.